Hello, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the fourth episode of our series, India Security Series with Colonel G.H.R. Naidu, and many thanks for joining us today. Uh, India Security Series is an initiative by the experts to spread general awareness to the public on various security issues faced by India. This series is also being broadcasted live in our YouTube channels. The participants present here can type in their questions while the presentation is on, and those questions will be addressed by Colonel Naidu by the end of the presentation. Now, let me begin this episode by introducing Colonel Naidu to all of you. Colonel Naidu is a civil engineer, management, and security professional with 45 years of experience in the field of combat engineering, chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, and explosive defense, security, and disaster management. He is a former member of International Civil Service while working as a Chief Chemical Weapons Inspector for nearly a decade with the OPCW, Netherlands, which also won the Nobel Peace Prize Award in 2013. Colonel Naidu is presently the Chief Consultant with CBRNE Secure India, a forum and knowledge center. He is a prolific writer and has participated in various international and domestic conferences on CBRN security, disaster management, and counter-explosive issues. He also writes articles for many CBRNE and CIED-related journals worldwide. I would now request Sir to take over the mic. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanchita. Very kind of you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. There's only one lady here. Today, in the episode 4 of India Security Series, I'm going to talk to you on border and coastal security and need for innovation. Before I go any further, I would like to emphasize again on why is the slide not moving? Excuse me, there's a problem with the slide. Shit.
Have it with starting as well.
Why the slide's not moving?
You can stop the screen share and again turn it on. So
No,
probably
let
that
me
might help.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry about it for the interruption. So just to bring in awareness to general public on various security challenges faced by India. Therefore, to that extent, the presentations are very basic in nature and simple, and not much of technical or operational details are included. For most of you are security professional, this would probably be a refresher or an add-on knowledge. Today's coverage of this topic, I would initially take up border security, followed by coastal security. In border security, we're going to understand what are international borders, line of actual control, line of control, border disputes, and also understand the various terrain along the international border or the LOC. And then go to the threats to the border security, border guarding forces, their strength and responsibilities, mechanisms or methods for securing the border, and various deficiencies observed in the present border guarding mechanisms, and certain innovations recommended by me. And in the coastal security, we understand the coastline and zone of rights, which are the territorial waters, contiguous zone, exclusive economic zone, and the continental shelf. And direct to coastal security, then we see what is the architecture for maritime and coastal security, the mechanisms for coastal security, and similarly, like in the border security, we see what are the deficiencies in the coastal security effort and innovations recommended. Now, coming to the international land border, we have roughly about 15,160 kilometers of land border with 7 countries. Now, starting from the west, with Pakistan, we have a border of roughly 3,323 kilometers, right from Gujarat, Rajasthan, Punjab, and the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir. Then we have 106 kilometer border with Afghanistan, followed by the border with China, which is roughly 3,500 kilometers, split into 3 segments. one starting from the Union Territory of Ladakh, coming right up to Himachal Pradesh and Uttarakhand, then a bit of border with Sikkim, and the contentious Arunachal Pradesh. It's roughly about 3,888 kilometers. Then we have the Indo-Nepal border of 1751 kilometers, Indo-Bhutan border of 699 kilometers, Indo-Myanmar border of 1,643 kilometers, and then the longest border with Bangladesh, roughly 4,100 kilometers. Now, we're going to, in detail, understand what is line of control and what is the line of actual control in the next slide. Now, after 1947, when Pakistan occupied what we call the Pakistan occupied Kashmir and the northern areas, the international border is no more relevant as far as the border security is concerned. What is more relevant is what is called the line of control, which was the original ceasefire line after the 1971 war. Now, based on the ceasefire line, the line of control was demarcated on the maps and authenticated by the both sides and is accepted as a line of control. The problem is here in the line of control, our troops and Pakistani troops are eyeball to eyeball. So any laxity in vigilance will result in nibbling actions, trying to capture a small important feature along the line of control. Then unfortunately in 1972, when the LOC was being marked for some very strange reasons, the marking stopped at what is called grid reference NJ9842, after which it made a statement that the line of control goes further to the north, which what India understands going north this way. But what Pakistan says, it has to be the same alignment of the line of control, and their contention is the line of control should be going what I am showing to you on the map. So till 1984, we did not know that Pakistan was allowing the tourists and the mountaineers to scale mountains in so-called Salatoro ranges, which houses the Sichuan Glacier. So in 1984, India went and captured the Salatoro Ridge line, and thereafter, the LOC goes now to the north, as mentioned here. Okay, so the line of control is roughly about 780 to 800 kilometers, which is actually manned by the army. We'll come to that subsequently. Now, after this, Afghan border is no more relevant to us because it is now with the Gilgit-Baltistan, which is the Pak-occupied Kashmir, part of the Union Territory of Ladakh now. Then you have the Indo-China border coming firstly to the border of Ladakh with this Xinjiang region of China. This is the Xinjiang region. This is the border with the province of this particular province of China. And there's a small bit of land which was donated or ceded by Pakistan in 1963 to China, which is actually our territory. And then the Indo-Tibetan border starts from this particular place of Karakoram Pass, where I'm put the pointer, goes all along, goes into the state of Jammu and Kashmir, and then to Himachal and further down. Now here, after 1962 war, in fact, China has not been accepting this as an international border. So there was a war in 1962, and Chinese had come and occupied Aksai Chin, and the present line of actual control, actually it is a wrong terminology, it is actually a line of perception. It's not marked, unlike the LOC. The LAC is not marked on the map, it's not authenticated. Even after 23 meetings to resolve this issue, Chinese very smartly by design are avoiding to demarcate the line of actual control. While India reserved its right on its claim for the international border as it is like this, but for interim, for peace purposes, it's agreed for demarcation of the line of actual control or line of perception, which was not accepted with China's. Now coming to various border disputes, like I mentioned to you earlier, we have a problem of Pakistan occupied Jammu and Kashmir, that is the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir. This area ceded by Pakistan to China on its own. It is our territory ceded to them. Then the Aksai Chin, which is the bordering the Union Territory of Ladakh. All this is the Ladakh. Then the border with Himachal, Uttarakhand. So we have some problems other than the Aksai Chin. It is the Demchuk area of Jammu and Kashmir. We have a problems in Himachal. We have problems in Uttarakhand. Very small bits of areas being claimed by China. But the most important thing is the Arunachal Pradesh, the so-called McMahon line, which was signed between China, between Tibet, that time Tibet and the British India, were accepted as the international border between Tibet and India. But China refuses to accept the McMahon line. And their claim line is right up to here, what I'm saying, the whole of Arunachal Pradesh, which they call it Southern Tibet. We have not many problems with Myanmar as far as the land border goes. There are very 2-3 places where the border posts are yet to be decided. And luckily, we have no problem with the Bangladesh. Whatever land border problems we had with Bangladesh got resolved last year or maybe 2018. We only have problems with the maritime boundaries with Bangladesh. Nepal was very peaceful till recently, but of late, Nepal has also started making noise on the Kalapani River side, a small area which they claim it is theirs, and India claims it is ours. So there is a problem. No problems with Bhutan, except this little portion which is jetting into India is called the Chumbi Valley. So there's a famous place, Doklam, which you all must have read in newspapers, is where the Chinese have come and occupied the Bhutanese territory, which is not advantageous to India. And both Indians and Bhutanese have objected to it. And there is a standoff as far as the Doklam concerned. So these are basically the border disputes. I've explained you the line of control. I've explained you the line of actual control, which actually should be line of perception, and then the border disputes in brief. Now let's see what are the terrains, various terrains along the land border. We'll again start from the west, India-Pakistan border. If you just imagine yourself, Gujarat, the complete border with Kutch and Pakistan is of creeks and salty, marshy run, you know. So it's all water, creeks. Then slowly it goes to the deserts in Rajasthan, then plains of Punjab, and then northern Punjab and southern Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir. We have the riverine terrain, the Satluj, the Chenab, the Dhabi River, you know, all flowing into Pakistan. The terrain is riverine, very difficult to guard. Then as we go up slightly, mild hills, and then when you go into the valley, Kashmir Valley, we have the mountains. Similarly, Indian-Tibetan border starting from the Union Territory of Ladakh, we have snow-clad mountains, thick forests when you come to Himachal and Uttarakhand, then snow-covered mountains when you come to Sikkim or even some parts of Himachal and Uttarakhand, and then Arunachal Pradesh. Indo-Nepal border, you know, Shivaliks, mild, hills, mountains, forests, and certain rivers flowing into India, like the Gandak River, the Kosi River, flowing into India. There's a riverine terrain there. The Indian-Bhutan border, similar to what is with Nepal, same mountains, hills, forests, and riverine. India-Myanmar border, not very high mountains, certainly mountainous, very thick forest, and certain rivers, riverine terrain. And finally, the India-Bangladesh border, most difficult border, the plains, waterlogged areas, the riverine terrain, because river Brahmaputra and Ganges flow in, and then when they come out into the Sundarbans, there is a lot of riverine terrain, then hills and jungles. So you just see your pictures here. You see Rajasthan, you know, moving sand dunes. You have, this is the Ladakh. You have the marshy areas in Bangladesh border. You have the thick jungles in what you call the Myanmar border. And you have these creeks in Sundarbans and in Gujarat. So it makes the guarding of the borders that much difficult because of varying terrains. Now, what are the threats for border security? You know, what are the threats at the border? The most important is violation of sanctity of the international border. So once it is accepted an international border, the border is marked by what is called the border pillars, as you see here, and the pillars are numbered. So if you're not doing regular patrolling, you will suddenly find these border pillars shifting. You know, so this is essential that though they're all marked, authenticated in the maps, and also satellite imagery is there, but always is good to be patrolling to ensure there is no sanctity violation of the sanctity of the international border. Now, along the line of control I mentioned to you earlier, it is even if a slight laxity in vigilance, the opposite, the enemy would occupy some important features like it happened so many times in Kashmir, which are tactically advantageous to them. So it has to be 24/7 guarded. That's why it's been handed over to the army. Then LAC, you must have seen you last, I think, couple of months, we have been having problem in Eastern Ladakh. So because their perception and our perceptions are different and they're not meeting. So we have problems. So there has been a transgression in Eastern Ladakh. Then second threat is infiltration, exfiltration of terrorists and anti-national elements. You've seen in Jammu and Kashmir, foreign trained terrorists, foreign sponsored terrorism. It happened in 1980s also. When Punjab was in problem, we had terrorists coming from across the border. And anti-national elements who sneak in and sneak out, creating problems in India for us. Then you have the illicit trafficking in narcotics, arms and contraband items. Even with so much of fencing, we still have so much of illicit trafficking of drugs, especially in Rajasthan and Punjab. Then we have to ensure the security of the border population. Not only the population, their properties. You must have read many times, cross-border firing in Jammu, in Pathankot, in northern Punjab, and southern state of Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir, where the civilian population is harassed by constant firing from across the border. So the threat to that extent is there for the population and the properties. Then there is always the influx of refugees from the neighboring countries due to violence, economic crisis, or instability in those countries. Like it happened in 1971, we had roughly about 6 million refugees coming from Bangladesh. There's a problem in Burma. The Rohingyas are now finding shelter as refugees in India. And we had problems in Sri Lanka. The Sri Lankan Tamils were coming because of violence to Tamil Nadu. So this is always a threat of influx of refugees. Under the humanitarian law, we are not supposed to be refusing entry to refugees, but it is a major security threat. Then we have illegal migration and human trafficking. You all know, as of today in India, there are roughly about 2.5 crore illegal Bangladeshis, whether it is in Bengal or northeastern states, and even states like Maharashtra and Delhi. There are huge, large number of illegal migrants coming from Bangladesh. And you have human trafficking, especially young girls being trafficked, sent across for various purposes. And you see the picture here. There are roughly about 23,117 cases of human trafficking for the last 2-3 years across our borders. So this is also a threat. Then very important is the radicalization of border population through religious propaganda. It is revealed that in last 10 years, most of the border villages in Rajasthan, suddenly a lot of masjids and mosques and madrasas have sprung up. So it surprised the border guarding forces. And most interesting part of it is the Maulvis in these madrasas or the mosques, they don't belong to the local area. They have been brought from outside. So there is a suspicion or a possibility of radicalizing the population against the present setup. And it did happen sometime way back in 1980s, even in Punjab was on boil. There was a certain propaganda to try and radicalize the population in the border areas. Now that is no more a problem with the internet coming and so many social platforms. You can still radicalize people through social networking and through internet. But suffice to say, it's still a problem, radicalization of the border population. So these are some of the threats I have given out here. Now let us see what are the border guarding forces, which are the forces which are boarding our borders, international borders, or the line of control, or the line of actual control. The oldest being the Assam Rifles. It was raised in 1835, very old, and it's the only paramilitary force in India. Rest are all police forces. They are not paramilitary forces. When you call an organization a paramilitary, those organizations are those units are organized on the army, like the army units, and officered by army. So that's why they are called the paramilitary forces. Though wrongly, some of these other forces also call themselves as paramilitary forces. They are actually central armed police forces. Then we have the Indo-Tibetan Border Police, which was raised in 1963 after the 1962 war. It was felt that we need some border guarding force for the Indo-Tibetan border. So it was raised in 1963. Then we have the Sashastra Seema Bal. It was earlier called Special Services Bureau, SSB, which was again raised after 1963 for protection of border population on the Indo-Tibetan border and for certain clandestine activities across the border. But in 2005, this organization was renamed as Sashastra Seema Bal and were made responsible for guarding the border with Nepal and guarding the border with India and Bhutan. Now, the last one is the Border Security Force. Was raised after 1965 war with Pakistan. Is a very huge force. It guards the Indo-Bangladesh border on the east and guards the India-Pakistan border on the west. So these are the 4 border guarding forces, all functioning under the Home Ministry, excepting for the Assam Rifles. Though it is under the Ministry of Home Affairs, it is under the operational control of the army. And about 20 or 23 odd battalions, about 50% of the Assam Rifles is working on the border, guarding the border with Myanmar. But rest of the other 20 odd battalions are working with the army for insurgency operations. Now, quickly to go through the strength and responsibilities, we have the BSF guarding the Indo-Bangladesh and Indo-Pakistan border, 4,100 kilometers of Bangladesh border. Out of 3,323 kilometers of the Indo-Pak border, with the line of control coming in, the border reduces to 2,851 kilometers, of which 750 kilometers is looked after by the army exclusively, with some BSF units interjected as into the less threatened areas. So the BSF has a very huge force of 192 battalions, 2,64,000 people, and roughly about 23,000 crores of budget. We have the ITBP, which was supposed to be guarding the India-China border, which includes Ladakh Xinjiang, Ladakh Tibet, and rest of India-Tibet border. So that reduces because of the occupation of Union Territory of Ladakh by Pakistan, part of it by China. The border reduced to roughly 2,771, of which there's a problem of your screens coming here in between. Anyway, so the length of with Himachal, it was 200. It is 200 kilometers. Uttarakhand 345, Sikkim 220, and Arunachal Pradesh 1,126 kilometers. So it's got 60 battalions with 90,000 strength as of today, and roughly about 6,800 crores of budget. We have the Sashastra Seema Bal looking at the Indo-Nepal border and Indo-Bangladesh border. Length of Nepal border 1,751 and 699. 73 units, battalions, roughly 95,000 people and 6,500 budget. Assam Rifles, same, Myanmar border 643 kilometers. And out of these 46 battalions, like I mentioned to you, about 20 battalions are in counter-insurgency role working with the army. Roughly 65,000 people and 6,200 this thing. Now, if you sum up all these things, 15,106 kilometers border, 372 battalions, roughly 500,000, slightly more than 500,000, and roughly about 45,000 crores of budget. So this is the strength of our border guarding force, a huge border force, I must say. Now, what is the mechanism used by these border security units to guard the border? The most important is what is called the border outpost. Now, earlier, every 6 kilometers, there used to be a border outpost, but after review, after the Kargil war, the distance between the border outpost has been now reduced to 3.5 kilometers. So all along the international border, all along the LAC, Indo-Nepal border in Arunachal Pradesh, we have what's called the border outpost. They are basically about 100 people at each of these outposts, which caters for accommodation, logistic support, and their operational functioning like the watchtowers. And where there is water border, like in Sar Creek in Gujarat, or say Sundarbans in West Bengal, the outposts are mounted on these small crafts. So this is a water outpost. Okay, from here the patrols go by boats across, and between these border outposts, the patrolling is carried out on a regular basis by foot. What you see here, they're carrying out by foot, by mobiles, by car, by camels, especially in Rajasthan, horses in Punjab, and boats like in Gujarat and border with Bangladesh. Then we also have what is called integrated checkposts for promotion of the border trade with the neighboring countries. There are roughly about 10 to 12 integrated checkposts set up, some in Kashmir, some in Punjab. I think one or two in Rajasthan, a couple of them in Bangladesh and Nepal. And there's one, of course, you have one at Nathula also. Now, this is manned not only by the border police, border guards, but also the customs and the immigration authorities. So then we have the border fencing. Almost most of the international borders are having a physical fencing, excepting for about 200 kilometers in the Kutch area of Gujarat and in the riverine terrain of northern Punjab and southern Jammu territory, Union territory, and certain portions in in Myanmar border. We do not have the border fencing. I would say 80% of a border is got a border fencing. It's a double fence with concertina wire coils inside. Now, each of these border fencings, for some technical reasons are not exactly where your border pillar is. They are slightly inside between, say, 100 to 500 meters. So there is always a problem for the farmers to go across and do their farming, especially in Punjab. That's not a problem in Rajasthan. But certainly the problem for the farmers, they have to go across the fence and do their farming. And all along this border fencing, it was planned to have the flood lighting, but unfortunately, only at very few places, I would say about 200 to 300 kilometers, the border fencing has got a flood lighting at places. And then in most part of Bangladesh border and in Pakistan border, we have the roads and tracks to facilitate movement of vehicles. It's not so in Gujarat, or it's not so in Rajasthan, and certainly not so with the Tibetan border. There's no road across. So these are the various mechanisms which are used for guarding the border. Then we have what's called a laser barriers. Wherever it's not physically possible to put up a fence or a wall, we have roughly about 130 unfenced sections, say, for example, in the Pakistan border, where we use the laser barriers. But unfortunately, some of these laser barriers don't function. Like it happened when the Pathankot airfield attack took place. These terrorists actually come from this particular unfenced section where they're supposed to be laser barriers, and they didn't function. And probably, I don't know why they did not function. So laser barriers at where it is not possible for physical barriers. Then we have now recently what's called a comprehensive integrated border management system, wherein you integrate manpower. So instead of having very manpower intensive patrolling, you mix of a manpower, the sensors, radar networks, intelligence, command and control solutions. For every 50 or 100 kilometers, there will be a command control center controlling the manpower, patrolling the various fixed sensor, put up, and intelligence coming locally from these human intelligence and also from the satellite intelligence. So this is a very comprehensive integrated. It's just been introduced in 2018, but there's only at selective places they're trying it out. So it's going to be taking a long time for us to finally have this comprehensive integrated management system, which will be very effective and efficient if all the technical tools function. In addition to this, we have also the border guarding forces use certain technical tools like the night vision devices, handheld thermal images, battlefield surveillance radars, direction finders, and certain unattended ground sensors and high-powered telescopes. You sometimes keep seeing pictures on the newspapers, and these people are watching through a telescope. Then a part of the border security is what is called border areas development, winning the hearts of the people in the border areas through their development, of those areas by building hospitals, schools, roads, electricity, water supply. Basically, if you have a very happy border population, they're going to help cooperate with the security forces and help in getting intelligence. And it in way also does, for indirectly develop their human index development, helps in increasing the human development index. Okay, so you see here the roads being laid, uh, the schools being built. And this is what I was mentioning about the comprehensive integrated border management systems. Sorry, I haven't put up a bigger picture. I had to, make a collage. See, and I was telling you the patrolling done by camels in Rajasthan, the patrolling being done here in, by the Indo-Tibetan Border Police. Then, so these are various mechanisms which are there for border security. Now, what are the deficiencies we generally find, which we observed? Having served for roughly 3 years in the line of control at Udi and having a BSF units coming under us, they were very interesting experience, I realized. And the most important deficiency or a drawback, that there are multiple border guarding forces. 4 different forces looking after 6 borders or 7 borders. It's it doesn't, it lacks uniformity and synergy or commonality of approach. So that's one major defect. So obviously, since there are a number of border guarding forces, you have no common training and operational doctrine philosophy. So everybody has got his own empire. He operates in his own way. So that doesn't augur well for a very systematic border guarding. Then border guarding forces are very often deployed for non-border guarding tasks. Now, very clearly, the group of ministers after the Kargil war clearly specified that the border guarding forces should not be used for other duties. So they're deployed roughly about 60 battalions, roughly 1/5 of the border guard forces are now deployed either in the Red Corridor, against the Maoists, or in Jammu and Kashmir, or in the Northeast. And also internal security duties or, rescue operations. So this is another big drawback. So they are, so they lose their touch if they are made to do other tasks. Then there is inadequate border guarding operational and administrative infrastructure. You see here this photograph is a pathetic state of having a accommodation at the border. So there is inadequate border guarding, both administratively and operationally. The what do you call the watchtowers and the ways to protect. And there was a proposal from the BSF to construct certain defenses all along the border, so that these people can defend themselves against initial, problems coming from across the border. Then also the mindset on technological solutions. Most of the people are mindset of looking for technology. They don't seek or pursue or exploit so much of technology, available all over the world. So this is another major deficiency. Then inadequate financial allocations, 50,000 odd, 50,000 odd crores, 1,000 crores for a force of roughly 500,000 and doing 15,000 odd kilometers of border guarding. I think the allocations are low. Then lack of non-availability of intelligence and satellite imagery. See, each of these forces have their own intelligence sections, which probably can get intelligence, maybe 10, 15 kilometers across. But what they need is inputs coming from the intelligence bureau or the research and analysis wing or the National Technical Research Organization, imagery intelligence coming to them to help them do their jobs efficiently and much better. So it's not available. Then there's lack of technical resources like repair maintenance for so much of technical equipment coming in, all those night vision devices and whole lot of radars coming in. There's no organization within these forces which can repair and maintain this. So they have to bank on the civil sources. So sometimes it takes a lot of time for them to be put on road. And very important issue, which really a big deficiency, the deputation for higher leadership positions into this organization. So there is a large resentment. The whole lot of Indian police service officers come on deputation, and almost 99% of the top positions, whether it is the Director General or the Additional Director General, the Inspector General, about 50%, and about 25% of the Deputy Inspector General positions are taken by the deputationists who come for a short time to these organizations. So there is a resentment in these people, and their career aspirations are curtailed. And the government is trying to address it, but then there is always vested interest. But having said that, there are some very good IPS officers who've done good for these organizations. Very good work they have done for this organization. But most of them come as a stopgap arrangement before they go into for their prize posting. They come as DG of SSB and all. So they don't understand the ethos and the functioning of these organizations. It certainly is a drawback. So these deficiencies, some of them I have listed here. There could be many. Now, what are the innovations? I would rather call it changes or improvements, as we call it innovations. So, which I would recommend is firstly establish a single border guarding force through mergers of these present four forces. Now, you can't have a separate army for Pakistan, separate army to fight China, and separate army to fight Bangladesh. It's ridiculous. Similarly, you can't have a separate border guarding force for Pakistan, one for Bangladesh. It's nothing but total empire building and vested interest playing against formation of a one entity called the Indian Border Guard. Now, this would help in evolving a common philosophy and doctrine, whether it is training, operations. They're incorporating the varying terrains and the threats, from various levels. So there is a recommendation that one single force, common philosophy, then a whole lot of training establishment by these four organizations, roughly about 100 odd training establishments. Each of them have their own academies, training colleges, technical training colleges, and jungle warfare schools, all those things. So you merging it and then bring what is called synergy and economy of resources and commonality of training. The next recommendation is very vigorously build border guarding operational infrastructure. See here, picture here. This is the ITBP accommodation, which is very well made up here in Ladakh. Now, something like that should come up. And give them the latest tools. Now you have the ITBP people, patrolling through skiing. These are all innovations. Indian Army does it, and ITBP is doing it. So we need to bring in, and increase the border guarding operational infrastructure. Next is raise technical support units to maintain what are the technical equipment which is presently there and which is going to come in a big way. In yesterday's newspaper, BSF has procured 480 drones, small and medium size, to help in aerial surveillance. Okay, so they need certainly somebody to look after. Then enhance the intelligence efforts and resources. There has to be a constellation of satellites exclusively for border guarding, border surveillance, I would call it. And we can afford it with our Indian Space Research doing a fantastic job. Like you have the constellation of satellites for the defense purposes. There's one required for the coastal security and another required for the border security. Then leveraging technology will certainly help in efficiency and economy of resources. And recommendation, stop deputation to higher echelons in the border guarding forces. Let their cadres be built up so that there are no heartburns and their career aspirations are met. Now, with this, I come to this border security. Now, let's move to the coastal security. Okay. Please tell me if I am overshooting. Okay, coastal security, we're going to discuss this. First, I'll explain to you the coastline. We have roughly 7,500 kilometers of the coastline. You see, mainland. Then we have the mainland coastline is roughly 5,342 kilometers. We have the island territories of Lakshadweep and Andaman, roughly 2,174 kilometers. We have, now coming to the zones of rights, we have the territorial waters, which is 12 nautical miles from the baseline. Then there is another thing called contiguous zone, where we could exercise our legal rights, another 12 nautical miles. Then we have the exclusive economic zone, 200 nautical miles from the baseline. Then we have the continental shelf, that is the land mass which is going under the sea, which could go right up to 350 nautical miles. So that continental shelf will be our zone of our rights. Then after which the high seas start and the deep sea starts, which generally come under the domain of the Indian Navy. So this is basically the coastline. Roughly 250 million to 300 million people stay within 50 kilometers of this coastline. So you can imagine 30 crore people live here. And roughly 3,600 fishing villages. It must have now gone up also. It's a very old slide I have here. 12 major ports and roughly 200 minor ports. And 44,120 square kilometers of mangroves. Especially here, you can hear, even if you're somebody who's been to Bombay, the Thane Creek, you see the mangroves there. So this is in nutshell explaining you the coastline. and the zones of rights. Now, what are the threats to the coastal security? So hostile vessels coming, operating in our territorial waters or exclusive economic zone, carrying out exploration for, sea wealth or materials, sea minerals. So this is one threat which generally happen, like you see now what's happening between China and Vietnam, or China and other countries. So the threat comes from hostile vessels in any of these areas. Then threat to critical coastal assets, like we have the ports, we have the nuclear facilities at Trombay, at Kalpakam in Tamil Nadu, we have the naval bases, Project Seabird, we have the oil storage facilities at Uran, at refineries, Jamnagar, and Space Center, the ISRO center at Sriharikota, and even in Tumba. So they're all there, and the test ranges, interim test ranges at Balasore in Odisha. So these are the assets which are threatened. And then there are sea assets like oil wells, Krishna Godavari Basin, Mumbai Basin, Bombay High, Kaveri Basin. And there are a lot of submarine cables. A pipeline coming from, from the Gulf countries to India, submarine pipeline. The cables. Recently, Prime Minister inaugurated the fiber optic cable from Madras to Andamans. So these are all the assets or things which need to be protected from threats. Then terrorists entering India through the coast, like you have Bombay, you remember, they come from the sea, the terrorists. Smuggling and illicit trafficking, which even today goes on in Gujarat. These people use dhows and they carry, oil, groundnut, rice and all, and bring back contraband items and drugs. So these are threats. More threats, landing of arms and explosives. If you recollect 1993 Bombay blast, the explosives for those blasts was landed at Konkan coast in connivance with customs officers. Can you imagine? So many tons of explosives was brought in through the coast. So it has to be protected. Then threat to marine environment, oil spills, water pollutions. There's see a picture here. They're trying to prevent, protect the marine environment. Then illegal migration and refugees. Like I mentioned in the border security, here also by boats, people coming from Bangladesh, Rohingyas, imagine, they're still coming by boats. Sri Lankan Tamils, when we had problem in Sri Lanka, they were coming by boats, to Tamil Nadu. So this is a problem. Then threat to marine trade and shipping. Sea pirates, whole of Arabia and Gulf of Aden, or what do you call the Red Sea. It's full of pirates coming from Somalia, and India has deployed certain task forces to protect our trade and shipping lines. Then certain maritime boundary disputes. We have the Sar Creek boundary problem with Pakistan unresolved, the New Moor Island, which is with Bangladesh, the Pak Strait with Sri Lanka, and again Sundarbans again with Bangladesh. So that is the threat. Maritime boundaries disputed, obviously, there are potential problems. Then adverse weather and cyclones. Regularly we have cyclones and adverse weather. Fishermen venturing into the sea, small boat, ships going. So this is a threat. So coastal security includes protecting these elements also. Now, what is the architecture for maritime and coastal security? We have the Indian Navy, which basically overall maritime security is responsible to the Indian Navy, with including the coastal and offshore security, which includes the exclusive economic zone and the high seas. Then the Indian Coast Guard, which the territorial waters and the economic zone, including areas patrolled by the coastal police. Now, I'll come to that, coastal police. And the Director General of Indian Coast Guard is the overall commander of the Coastal Command. There's a new command which was created called the Coastal Command. He is overall in charge and he coordinates between central and state agencies. The whole lot of central agencies and 9 coastal states. So it has to be coordinated, and he is the overall commander for the Coastal Command. We have the coastal police, 9 coastal police states. There are 9 states. And they carry out patrolling and surveillance in coastal areas, particularly in the shallow waters up to about 3 kilometers. They've all been provided with boats to carry it out, but still there's a lot to be done as far as the coastal policing comes. You see here, Andhra Pradesh Coastal Police, they have their own insignia. They have the Tamil Nadu, West Bengal Coastal Police, and we have the Coastal Police of Tamil Nadu. Kerala has done very well. So they have what is called the Marine Police or the Coastal Police. They have been provided with boats and all. In addition to this, part of the security architecture is the Director General Shipping, Director General Lighthouses and Lightships, Customs Department, Fisheries Department, the ports, the coastal states, the Ministry of Defense, the Minister of Home Affairs, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Minister of External Affairs. A whole lot of people come into the gambit of, into the architecture of maritime and coastal security. You see the insignia of the Indian Navy, Coast Guard, and 3 coastal police insignias. Now, what is the mechanism used for coastal? Like I said, means of doing coastal guarding, border guarding. In coastal guarding, we have the Indian Coast Guard, which has got 5 Coast Guard regions. As per the Indian Maritime Law, there are 5 regions, 12 Coast Guard districts all along these 9 states, 42 Coast Guard stations, and 24 Coast Guard air stations. So by year 2022, this Coast Guard will be a force of 175 seacraft and 110 aircraft. They are really reached about 90% of the strength as of today. Now, what do? They carry out the maritime and aerial surveillance in all these areas. So they are taking care of roughly 2 million square kilometers of the exclusive economic zone all around India. 2 million square kilometers is carried out the maritime and aerial surveillance. Then they carry out certain law enforcement India's jurisdictional waters, like safety and protection of our artificial islands, like say Bombay High or any other artificial islands or offshore terminals. Then installations and other structures and devices in any maritime zone, you know, what I was telling you, the sea assets, underground sea assets, and providing assistance to fishermen while at sea, while in distress, and assisting customs authorities in anti-smuggling operations. They are also looking after anti-terrorism, anti-piracy, or they are deployed in Arabian Sea, and of postal security. They are also carry out search and rescue missions, and marine environmental protection is a part of coastal security, and medical evacuation is what Coast Guard does. In addition to the Coast Guard, there is what is called, like we have the border, system surveillance network. We have the coastal surveillance networks. It covers the entire coastline and prevents intrusion of undetected vessels. And what does it comprise? It has got 84 stations all along the coast manned by the Indian Coast Guard, which have static sensor and coastal radars. Second, they have what's called automated identification system for all vessels which are 20 meters and bigger. So there are transponders which are fitted into these vessels, and they are tracked, they are identified through the transponders. The Indian Space Commission is supposed to be providing these transponders. Not much headway has been made as far as the automatic identification system of vessels go. This is all post 2008, all these developments after the Mumbai attacks. Then we have the DG Shipping carrying out vessel traffic management information system. They have a system to track any ships coming in, going, managing the traffic. They know which ship is going, which ship is coming. So that is the vessel traffic management system. And also the Fisheries Department has issued biometric ID cards to roughly 2 million fishermen all along these 9 coastal states. Much more to be done, but about 90% of the fishermen are covered. Now, all these form part of the comprehensive coastal surveillance network. Okay. The next entity here, we have the coastal police stations. 9 coastal states, 183 coastal police stations so far. There's supposed to be 183. As of now, 131 are existing. We have 97 checkposts, 59 outposts, and 200 odd boats, which can go in the shallow waters. And we need for, the jetties or the piers for these boats to park. So we have 60 jetties. We have the marine operations centers, about 10 of them. And there's the National Academy for Postal Policing, which is being established at Oka in Gujarat. But of late, because of financial problems, they have done away with or temporarily held the National Academy of Coastal Policing. It's on hold now. And as of now, the coastal police, roughly about 2,500 policemen in these 9 states, carry out so-called shallow surveillance, area patrolling and surveillance of the coast in the shallow waters. Then there's something called International Ship and Port Facilities Security Compliance. There's an ISPS code. So all the 12 major ports and 64 out of the 200 minor ports are compliant. They have subjected, or they have followed those things which are required. So they are compliant as far the ISPS code goes. Then there is coastal mapping, which is being done, which indicates the coastal police stations, coast guard stations, fishing harbors, ports, naval establishments, anything related to coastal security. They are all marked so that anybody who is in problem knows where is what as per the coastal map. Then, like we have the border area development programs, we have the community interaction programs, with the fishermen and the coastal population, just to win their hearts. Any problem they have, especially certain isolated coasts in Konkan, or even certain isolated posts in the coast of Gujarat. This helps community integration program. And then there is an SOP issued by the Coast Guard, which does the coordination and cohesion of coastal security agencies. So I covered the methodology or the mechanisms in the coastal security. Now, what are the problems? What are the agencies? Now, I did mention to you the architecture. There are 15 agencies involved in the so-called coastal security. So therefore, there are challenges of integration, of coordination between multiple stakeholders. And then other than Coast Guard and the Indian Navy, most of these people lack clarity on their roles. You ask the DG shipping, or you ask the fisheries department, or you use the DG lighthouses and lightships. There is no clarity. So there's still lack of clarity on their roles in the overall coastal security architecture. Then there's a limited focus between by the central and state governments between the Ministry of Defense and Ministry of Home Affairs, who should control the Indian Coast Guard. As of now, it is with the Indian Ministry of Defense, but MHA has been trying to get Indian Coast Guard, saying that coastal border, they call it coastal border. So coastal border is a Home Affairs thing, so it should rightly be coming under the Ministry of Home Affairs. So there's a tussle going on, uncertainty on the ICG. Then unavailability of requisite critical infrastructure like surveillance mechanism to monitor security, coastal security. Though I did mention in the mechanisms, but it's not requisite. It's not what as per requirement. Very technical, critical infrastructure is lacking. Then vessel tracking management system grossly incomplete. I made a mention of it. National automatic identification system for those vessels which are 20 meters and above. I think so far about 1,000 transponders have been supplied by the Space Commission to the Department of lighthouses, to put it into those vessels. And through these transponders, one could track them. Then issue of biometric for the IDs for the fishermen is still not completed, some more, and it needs to be upgraded. And inadequate coastal police force, 2,500 coastal police for a coast of 7,500 is ridiculous, I would say. And lack of, landing jetties and repair cover. It so happened after 2008 Bombay attack, the hurriedly Mumbai police bought some boats, but there is nobody to maintain them. And they were all parked like museum pieces at the gateway of India. If you go to Bombay, you find about 5-6 of these boats unused lying there even today. So these are all the deficiencies. Now again, coming to the innovations, there is a requirement of a satellite constellation exclusive for coastal surveillance. I've shown it here in this slide. Like we have for border, we have the defense. You have a group of satellites exclusively, catering for the coastal surveillance. Then more emphasis on postal security, port security. Some of these major ports are very well covered, but so many other ports, they are not very well covered under the, there's no infrastructure. Now you see the cameras here. This must be some very big port here. I think it's Bombay port. And then consolidation of various stakeholders. Everybody is, functioning in their cubicles, So they need to be consolidated and their resources pulled together, ego problems sorted out, and all the stakeholders to be brought together. And then all coastal states and union territory to set up maritime boards, like Maharashtra has got a maritime development board to take care of the coastal areas development. Like we have the border area development, we have the maritime boards, which could be used for development, also tourism, and for security purposes. Then there is a need for setting up a multidisciplinary National Maritime Authority, NMA. It's not there. Then creation of modern fishing harbors like what you see here. And go and see the fishing harbors in Orly in Bombay. They're very funny, and see here how they are well organized. Then creation of the strengthening of the marine police by states. You see here, nice. This is a Kerala. They have nice, beautiful boats here, marine police, Kerala. And additional jetties and repairs and maintenance infrastructure. And bring in private players, like now in the defense field, we brought the private players. We need to bring in private players for technological innovations. They would do wonders. Otherwise, government, very typical, minded thinking. We're not making any progress as far as technological innovations go. So we need to bring in private players. And lastly, we have need to interact with countries which adopt, and customize their best practices. Some are very fantastic countries. Some countries do fantastic coastal securities. So they need to be, we can interact them, learn from them. In fact, Coast Guard has been interacting a lot, but I think even the coastal police should interact with some of these foreign countries. We have the coastal police. Now that brings me to the end of my, sorry, I took more than what is time required. And we're going to meet on 10th of September on the topic internal security, certain new and growing challenges. So with this, I thank you all for your great patience. I really appreciate your patience. So if you have any questions, I am ready to answer.
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
Actually, Thavle sir had some questions. He had to leave because of some family emergency. Okay. So I will read out the questions he sent.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, he sent it through the RSVP. So he mentioned that you have to answer that, so that I'll send him the recording later. So the first question is, do our border check post or ports have CBRN control in terms of surveillance, detection, interdiction, and response?
Okay, for that, my answer is no. However, at certain ports, big ports like Bombay, they have radiation monitors. So any consignment coming, they, unlike what is there in the West, the entire container is put through a scanner, for any CBRN material. We don't, as of now, have it. We only have handheld detectors, radiological detectors, to detect anything with, smaller consignments. Next question.
Are our customs, immigration, and border security agencies trained and equipped for CBRN incident response?
And the answer again is no. However, the customs officers are trained by the OPCW on various aspects of chemicals. What are the various chemicals, how to detect them. But to support a CBRN incident, they don't have. They do not have any facilities. Of course, Coast Guard may be having their own CBRN protection in their ships and aircraft, but none of these coastal security or the border security people have. However, the border security and ITBP and the SSB have 2 to 3 battalions of theirs, each functioning as NDRFs. So those NDRF battalion, those people, when they finish their tenure, they move to normal regular battalions. So they are a pool of trained manpower as far as the CBR incident response is concerned. Next.
Does India have a mechanism for intelligence and monitoring of trans-border proliferation of toxic materials?
Again, no. Again, no. Because we have this integrated check post wherein we have the detectors to check probably radiological material coming in. But most of this trafficking goes on illegally. So there is no mechanism to check, any toxic material coming. So we are in a very nascent stage as far as this is concerned.
Okay.
Yeah, next.
Okay. The next question is from one of our interns. His name is Priyansh. The question is, I've already worked on a smart surveillance robot for border areas with extreme climatic conditions and would like to know the protocols for air surveillance and a comparison between ground and air surveillance.
Okay, let me congratulate you, whoever it is, for your great work on making a robo. But understand these robots have certain limitations, and especially the type of terrain which is there all along our international borders. These robots would not be very functional, you know. So that would be the first problem. Second problem, at least on the border security, there is no aerial surveillance carried out. They have an air wing, but that is only for communication, travel purposes. There is no aerial surveillance carried out by any of the border guarding forces. So therefore, there is no question of integration of ground and aerial surveillance. And these robots probably could function in certain planes in this thing, but seeing the terrain which I showed to you in my second or third slide, I don't think these robots would be effective. Okay.
Thank you, sir. I don't think there are any more. Yes, yes, there is a question from Pramod, sir. The question is, what kind of policies have been implemented with respect to coastal policing since the 26/11 attack, and does reducing the IPS deputation in CAPF improve the morale of CAPF officers?
Okay. Firstly, the 2008 Bombay attack was an eye opener. There's a lot of things which moved. So initially there was a lot of momentum, and slowly the momentum died down. You know, our memories are very short. So we get into other priorities. This is no more a priority. But certainly what we were in 2008 and what we are now, in fact, there is a revolution in the border guarding since 2005, I must say. But it picked up after this Bombay episode. And we are doing a lot. But then we need a lot of funding, especially the comprehensive border management system, which I was talking for the border security. And the what do you call the surveillance system, coastal surveillance network. It needs funds. It needs this thing. So we are much lagging as far as these are concerned. So what is the second part of his question? Yeah, regarding the deputation is, like I told you, some IPS officer did great for this organization, but there are many IPS officers who come as a stopgap arrangement for these organizations. So there is a heartburn, and recently Supreme Court has passed certain orders. Up to certain level, you should encourage a promotion of the local cadre, and there is a big movement. People are now resorting to going to the courts to get justice. But the Indian Police Service is also very strong lobby they have. They'll fight for it because there's so many higher up positions. So there'll always be a tussle between the CAPF cadres, and the IPS cadre. But there has been a last 2 years or 3 years due to the court cases, primarily because these people went to court and won. So there are certain higher level positions being, I think, one ADG, Additional Director General, each will be belonging in each of these forces belong to the local cadre. They're not from the IPS. So there are improvements, but there is certainly a heartburn, and this need to be addressed because these people who come from the police service, they may be smart, but they don't understand the ethos and the culture of the organization. You see, so that's very important for them to understand. Respect the way they dress. You must amalgamate themselves with this organization, like what we do in the army. A similar thing needs to be done, but unfortunately, it's lacking. So that is the answer.
Okay. The next question is, NAB grid, is this project include CBRN things?
No. NAT grid is basically a national intelligence grid. Okay. Now that is under the Ministry of Home Affairs. It was started roughly about 15, 16 years back. And the first managing director was an ex-army officer. But every time I read the Ministry of Home Affairs report, even as the latest report, they still say it is still under progress. So so-called national intelligence grid, which was envisaged, is still not come into play. It is under development. So it's roughly about 12 to 14 years. It all started when Chidambaram was the home minister, and one of the army officers who is an expert in this was made the managing director. He did start off well, but over a period of time, people lost track, and very passing reference to NAT grid is given in the MHA report, which I just read it, for the year 2018 and 19. It doesn't have any CBRN as of now content. It's basically intelligence sharing related to every area. Okay, maybe CBRN, but we haven't reached that state. We haven't built up the infrastructure. It's supposed to be, I think, coming up at Bhopal, the main infrastructure. We haven't built up the infrastructure fully. So we have, I don't think it'll be operationalized in next couple of years. That's my feeling. Okay.
Okay, sir. The next question is from Colonel Raju. The question is, lack of intelligence coordination between armed forces and border security force. How can this be resolved?
See, this is a perpetual problem. It's not only between armed forces and the border security force. It's a problem between the armed forces and the intelligence bureau, armed forces and the research and analysis wing. I've served in UDI. I still remember there's an army military intelligence, which is called Intelligence and Field Security Unit, which goes across and gets intelligence. We have the intelligence bureau, which is a counterintelligence unit functioning. And we have the, what is called the RAW, which does the intelligence, external intelligence. Now they have the same source. Now this fellow, what he tells, he doesn't, the same information is given to 3 different organizations and collecting money from 3 different organizations, and they don't share in between, they don't share this intelligence because of whatever is organizational one-upmanship. It's unfortunate the intelligence is not shared. Right, it goes right up to the top into the Joint Intelligence Committee, wherein we have the IB, we have the RAW, and we have all the 3 military intelligence wings. They sit together and put things together, but then by then it's too late. So at the ground level, the coordination, the understanding, and I can talk authoritatively on it because we had a unit with us there, the military intelligence unit, and we used to have the IB fellow floating around, we used to have the RAW fellows floating around, but they're never a coordination. And every time who gets the information first, and they're getting the same information from the same source and paying 3 times to these guys. So that's a big lacuna in the system, and I don't think it can end because these rivalries, these competition, and these one-upmanships will continue. Yeah, next.
There are no more questions, sir.
Okay.
I will be sending the PPT and the recording of the session to all of you who joined here. It will be helpful. I mean, if you had any questions, it will be helpful for you to get the answer.
Okay, I'd like to thank you all for your patience and bearing with me for about an hour or so. Thanks to Hardik and Sanchita for your great efforts. And let's see and meet on 10th of September on a new topic. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining. We will meet again on the 10th of September. And also, sir, this was a wonderful session. We definitely got to learn a lot from here. Thank you, everyone.